Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Rewired Sober. I'm your host, Kate Vitella. First things first, you know what would be super awesome is if you would like and subscribe the podcast and leave a review because I'm only in the high 60s for episodes and no one can find me. And I know people are always looking for a sobriety podcast. And the way that it bumps it up on the algorithm is if you leave a review. So that being said, okay, so today is a solo episode. I got a lot for you here and I'm excited to talk about it. I did have a guest lined up, but she canceled and I was like, you know what? I have so much to say on this other topic that I decided to pivot. So you've heard a lot in personal development spaces about this being the year of the horse. And last year in 2025 was the year of the snake, where we were sort of shedding old identities and letting go of things that didn't serve us and like the shedding the old skin of the snake, right? I am not big on this. I'm not well versed. I am not a spiritual healer. I don't own crystals, but I do know the general conversation around this, and it certainly gets talked a lot about. So if last year was about shedding old identities, then 2026 is the year of the horse, which is kind of about embracing truth and autonomy and refusing old controlling systems. Particularly the piece of this that I resonate with is the fire horse. I just like the word fire. No, the fire element, because it's passionate and rebellious and expressive and fearless. And these years historically get labeled as really bold or disruptive and transformative. And I am feeling that big time right now. You know, people, especially women, stepping into independence and refusing to be controlled. And it kind of lines up, right? We shed old identities in 2025. And then this year we step into a more authentic life. And so a couple of days ago, I woke up in my morning routine. I often pull a oracle card from the Divine Feminine deck from Meggan Watterson. If you would have asked me a few years ago if I would be into oracle cards, I would have said, no, you're fucking crazy. And I'm not into that snake oil. But since I've gotten into the work of Meggan Watterson, and it's so empowering, she's a feminist theologian. I've talked about her a lot on this podcast. She's been so inspiring to me on my journey of feminism, intersectional feminism, deprogramming AA, deprogramming organized religions and patriarchal structures. And all of it has really been inspired by her work. And I try to lean toward love and not anger. But of course, like I'm loving this fire horse piece, right? So when I pull these cards, like you pull a card and it gives you an intention and then something to meditate on. And this particular deck is 53 cards of various goddesses. So it can be anything from, Mary to saints to Hindu goddesses. It's all across the globe of all history. And you kind of shuffle them up and then you pick the one that stands out to you. You can't really see on the back of the card. You can't see what you're grabbing. So I've done this almost every day for quite a while now. And no matter how much I shuffle, I swear, you guys, no matter how much I shuffle these cards, I pick the same ones. And I've picked and it's always been so spot on. I'm like, what the hell's going on here? Like the other day I shuffled and shuffled and shuffled, and I picked again the card of the Hindu goddess Kali. And some of you may be familiar with her because in Hinduism, she's one of the more well-known, right? And she is not soft. She is not the gentle kind of the divine feminine energy. She's not telling you to like light a candle and journal about your feelings. Kali is like the energy of truth. And she's the one who cuts away the bullshit and the illusions, and she destroys what's false. So something real can finally take its place. And when I pull this card, the intention on the card says, I release all that doesn't serve me and be the truth of who I am. And then the meditation is on something that I found to be pretty confronting. You're to meditate on What is falling away from your life that no longer serves you? And before I went to meditate on this, because meditation is hard for me, like I'm a hyperactive spaz. It's hard for me to get into that zone. I may have a pinch of ADHD. I'm not sure. Maybe I drink too much caffeine. I have no idea. But I have to admit, it's super hard. So sometimes meditating on paper works, like Julia Cameron's morning pages in her book, The Artist's Way, where you just sort of dump out onto the page. You scribble what comes to mind and you don't edit it and you don't try to put it into any kind of form. Sometimes meditating on paper like that for me is really helpful. And then I can maybe drop into a little bit more of traditional meditation and prayer. Sometimes not. So what I started doing immediately was scribbling down all these things in my life that were sort of no longer serving me. And the intention here is not to look at what should fall away, and not even to look at like parts of my life that I wish I could change, but sort of what's already dissolving, right? Because it was never aligned with who I am or who I'm becoming. And it hit me so hard because if you're paying attention, life does this to us all the damn time at several phases in our sobriety and our personal development. And, things will start to feel tight. Certain habits don't fit anymore. Conversations feel forced. Relationships feel forced. People in your life don't fit, right? And some identities start to feel a little bit like a costume. And I think instinctually for most of us, there's fear around that. I know personally, I try to hold on tight, to grip on and to rationalize. I don't like to let things go. I try like to negotiate with an old version of myself. And it takes a little bit for me to embrace the real invitation of something different. And when I was scribbling all this stuff down, I couldn't believe this giant list of things falling away. And it reminded me of this stick-it note I have on my cork board that says choose love over fear. And that's from A Course in Miracles. And I glanced up at this. Now, not this is not because I have everything figured out, right? Believe me, I don't. But growth is something that is asked of all of us. And so I try to embrace this. It asks us to stop clinging to old identities and beliefs and habits and expectations. And if I am nothing else, I try to be a humble example of a forever student and forever growing. And so I thought, okay, what if the invitation is like choosing love over fear? And not in the corny way you think. But I have a tattoo on my forearm. Like all my stories start with I have a tattoo, but it says only love is real. And that's also from A Course in Miracles. And what that means to me, is the rest is just ego, bullshit, and fear. Only love is real. And the rest is like what's imagined and things we've drummed up in our head, often from an ego space. And I don't mean ego as in arrogance. I mean fear. So I started thinking about this, right? And fear always tells us to hold on as tight as possible. But love says it's okay to tell the truth. Fear says stay where it's safe. And love says it's okay to become who you actually are. And when I pulled that Kali card, that question just all kind of hit me. And I really was thinking about where I'm at in my recovery journey. Am I making decisions out of fear or out of love? And this is so relevant to all of us on a sobriety journey, right? Sobriety is like one giant shedding. You're shedding behaviors, coping mechanisms, and then you get into shedding old stories and the roles that you played to survive. I mean, it's just one big shedding process. And sometimes it's slow and painful until you start stepping into a more truer version of yourself, until you get more comfortable. And so I thought I would talk about what came up for me, what I'm deciding to shed, and what I'm deciding to embrace. And when I was done, it was almost like, wow, okay, it's March and I just made my New Year's resolution. But it wasn't like that. It was like stuff that's already happening. Like, I don't plan for this to be the way it is, but I'm in the thick of it, is basically what I'm trying to tell you. God, speaking of dissolving, I can barely talk. I just had some lip fillers dissolve today because I had this one piece on the right side that was like digging into my side of my mouth that got too big, and I was biting it with my tooth. So I have this giant fat lip. Anyway, I don't know if you've ever dissolved filler, but it hurts like a motherfucker. But it's worth it because fillers get like all weird and out of control. And I love talking about this stuff. So yeah, had that dissolved. My lips all swollen and weird. And I'm hoping I look like a normal human coming soon. Okay, so here's what I wrote down. Now, this is not going to be a surprise if you've been listening to this podcast, this first one, but definitely I'm in the phase of shedding dogma and fear-based thinking around recovery. If you've been listening, you know I'm really working to deprogram some of the dogma that came with parts of my recovery and my experience. And this is not about attacking a program or saying anything, for those who are in those programs. I'm grateful for the pieces that helped. But over time, in the rooms of 12-step, I started noticing that things weren't sitting right with me anymore. It felt very black or white. It felt really absolute, right? And there was always that concept that if you question something, you're in denial. That's your disease talking. All the things. There's a lot of rhetoric in these recovery spaces, and a lot of it comes straight out of the 30s. And it gets repeated so often that it starts to sound like science, but it's not. It's just kind of folklore that's been passed down. And so after spending years in these rooms, I had to really work on shedding that dogma and all that fear-based messaging. It had filled my head so much. And there was so much gaslighting, especially in the beginning, that it just kind of sat with me as this like internal narrative, this looping tape in my head of voices of what my sponsor would say or someone would say. And when I step back from it, I really see that like, that wasn't helpful. And there was a lot of gaslighting and a lot of fear mongering. And I also just reached a point where my brain and honestly, my freaking soul, I just couldn't ignore the dissonance anymore. I mean, I'm a fucking nurse. I'm trained in addiction science, and I've spent years studying how the brain actually changes. And when I started doing that, like some of that dogma naturally started to fall away, and I started really questioning. And it wasn't out of anger. I mean, I was joking in a podcast that sometimes I can get snarky about it, but really there's a lot of clarity around it. But I'm being very intentional about shedding that fear-based thinking and that dogma. The reason why I'm saying this kind of sounds like a New Year's resolution is because for each thing I realized I was shedding in my life, letting go of, I was sort of embracing something new that felt more honest and more expansive. So obviously, I'm embracing neuroscience. I'm understanding how neuroplasticity works, how habits form and change, and understanding the nervous system and trauma and emotional regulation. But I've also been embracing a radical feminist lens on recovery, looking honestly at how women experience addiction differently and how shame and caretaking roles and cultural experiences coming from the intersections of various backgrounds and LGBT, how that can shape our drinking. And the most important part of this for me is I'm embracing self fucking trust. And there's this the idea that questioning things doesn't have to be framed up as rebellion. It can be more like emotional intelligence. Recovery doesn't require you to shut down all your critical thinking. It just requires you to become more honest with yourself. And I love the work that I've been embracing. I feel more free and more on fire for this work and this messaging. It's so much more aligned than anything I ever recited in the rooms of AA. And that's just my personal truth. But when I stepped away from 12-step and I really examined, what if I just spoke freely? And this type of stuff started coming out. And then the feminist lens started coming out. it was like I had definitely landed on what was true for me. I mean, I could feel it resonating. And that never happened in the rooms of AA for me. It just didn't. I recited all the things. I did all the things. I said all the things. I called myself an alcoholic. I read the same book over and over, but nothing really like rattled me like this work has. And so that's how I know I personally, for me, I'm on the right track. And the women I'm working with, if someone's going to come to me, then obviously this messaging is resonating. Like you're feeling this too. So we're shifting from fear-based thinking to self-trust. It's been like the most liberating part of my sobriety. I'm freaking loving this. But speaking of, if you're going to work with me, another big thing I realized I'm in a phase of shedding is this very cliched, like sort of online business industrial complex. Um, this is an area that's been showing up for me a lot. So don't be surprised if you click on my link tree and like everything's gone because I'm sort of burning it down and starting over. And in a really purposeful way. This has been showing up for me so much, and if you've ever tried to build something online, you know that there's this entire ecosystem of advice out there telling you how you're supposed to do it. God, and if you have friends who are entrepreneurs, there's jealousy and power struggles and insecurity and God, I've lost friends and barf. And, so I'm really working on shedding that. And what I'm letting go of is the idea that I needed a fancy platform to look legitimate as a coach. I'm shedding the pressure to run everything through expensive online platforms because that's what my coaches said would work. Posting every day on social media, reach out to 100 people, optimize your funnel, grow your list, scale. I am shedding that constant stream of marketing advice. I don't know about you, but social media makes me want to gag every time I open it up. I go immediately to my personal page and start looking at fashion because it's really hard for me as a business owner to be in this marketing game. It just feels exhaustive. We all joke about being in an attention economy, but oh my God, it's disgusting. And I don't think it resonates with people anymore. I just don't. There's this whole culture online that turned helping people into a numbers game and the personal development space. And for me, all of it got really uncomfortable and it started to feel disconnected from why I even fucking started this in the first place. I didn't become a sober woman and a psychiatric nurse and an addiction specialist so I could spend my time tweaking my landing pages. So some of this stuff's just falling away. The tools are good, right? But like I've let go of expensive business coaches. As you know, thanks to this awesome audio I'm rocking here, as you know, I don't have a podcast editor anymore. And I'm not buying the bullshit that I need all this expensive platform in order to look legitimate. That was something that I think insecure me told myself in the first place when I started 2.5 years ago, I started coaching, and a year ago, I started this podcast. And I think I had this imposter syndrome that like, oh gosh, no one's going to take me very seriously. So I have to show up with all these bells and whistles. No, that's not how it is. I have enough self-trust, again, because of my personal development journey. I don't know. All of it is coming together, and maybe it's midlife. I'm out of fucks, but I have enough self-trust to know I've been coaching long enough, nursing long enough, sober long enough, all the things that I might just send you a fucking Zoom link and say, you want to work with me? Let's do this, right? I don't know. I'll work out the details. I'm going to be working with She Recovers. I'm now a certified She Recovers coach. I'm going to be meeting people in more intentional spaces and really embracing authentic connection. So if this podcast resonates with you when I'm being like brutally honest and raw and what I'm talking about resonates and you reach out, perfect. You might be an awesome client for me. If I meet you in a recovery meeting for women like She Recovers or the Sober Mom spaces, I'm part of the Sober Mom Collective. I'm part of the Sober Mom Cafe, I think. I don't know if I've actually joined as a member, but Suzanne is a friend of mine. I refer people to the Sober Mom Cafe. I'm part of TLC. I'm very involved, and I hope to meet people in those spaces. I meet people in real life. I'm so exhausted of the online culture. I don't think anyone believes any of the shit anyway. With AI, it's so tweaked and filtered and it's gross. It's actually gross. Like, it's all so AI'd and everyone's using ChatGPT. You can't even read anything without wondering, did someone actually write that? So I want to have real conversations and real community. I want to show up live and I want to be in spaces where women are actually talking to each other. So reach out to me after a podcast and let me know if something hits, because this is where I'm going with my marketing. I mean, the truth is, a lot of meaningful work in the recovery space has never come from a funnel or an algorithm or, AI. It comes from people sitting together in rooms, sharing honestly, learning from each other, finding the courage to be honest. And that was the magic of AA when it first started. It was the only game in town where you could walk into a room and people would honestly share about struggling with alcohol. Now, to this day, I mean, if I walked into a room tomorrow and it was a She Recovers Live meeting, I mean, that would have saved my life, right? If those were available back then. But you get what I'm saying. The magic of AA really didn't have anything to do with the structure or the wording or the steps or, God forbid, the big book. It had everything to do with people sitting in community. Less optimization, more real connection. And I'm so exhausted of chasing growth metrics and trying to put together content. And it doesn't even feel like me. It feels gross. And I don't even want these podcasts to sound curated. And, most of the time I'm just fumbling with my words and saying fuck. So, but you get to at least hear my true voice, right? So there's my shed and embrace all in one. I mean, my business is radically changing and I have dropped it all the way down to the very basics that I need to coach with people. And the rest, at least for now, I don't know, maybe someday I'll have some fancy website, but not now. And this podcast isn't fancy. It's just me. It's just me screaming into a microphone, while my stepson's downstairs watching cartoons. Okay. Taking a break from screaming. What else am I? Okay. Here's another one. And this kind of falls in line with, it all falls together. But this last year, I think especially because of Trump, I am shedding the good fucking girl look, the good girl mentality, even the thought that I am a good girl. I don't even care. The pretense. I'm shedding all that. And I am embracing being an angry fucking feminist. In fact, on my Instagram, I actually, and this was to detract from men following me, but I wrote, this is a personal blog, angry feminist. But I'm embracing feeling it all and not staying quiet and not trying to pretend like I'm good and palatable and marketable. I'm not editing myself anymore. Call it midlife, call it MAGA, call it war, call it ICE. I mean, we're in a shitstorm and I don't have the time nor the inclination to play good girl. I got to be honest. I am not the one who's going to stay quiet about certain topics because I don't want to make people uncomfortable. No, I'm the one who is going to speak out about politics, about women's rights, immigration. I don't care if it upsets the algorithm. I've lost followers. I've lost friends. Same with AA. I don't care. I'm shedding that. Now, is it painful to lose friends over your beliefs in politics, your belief about recovery? Yes, but it's also very, very eye-opening. And I'm exhausted of women being told to not be angry. It's okay to be angry right now. Like I said, I'm taping a whole episode on sacred rage. We've been told, don't be too loud, don't be too opinionated, don't rock the boat. And that conditioning is showing up everywhere. It's showing up in our politics, in our organized religion, in the cultural expectations, what women are supposed to be. And no, thank you. The older I get, the longer I live as a sober woman, the less I am willing to keep shrinking. And I will certainly not be shrinking myself to fit into systems that were never fucking designed with women's freedom and autonomy and peace in mind. So if there was ever a time you thought I was a good girl, that's falling away, which you obviously don't if you listen to this podcast because all I do is drop F bombs. And yet I can honestly say, even though I really try to embrace authenticity, I am loud, I'm vocal, I'm, kind of gregarious. There's still been a lot of fear in me. I'm just now speaking up about how I feel about 12-step rooms. There's still been a lot of fear, and rightly so, because God, there's the wrath of social circles and friends. I live in a fairly small community, and I can tell you, my friends from the 12-step rooms, I will run into them at the grocery store and they pretend they don't know me. And that is because I've spoken up about the rooms. And I know when I was in AA, my sponsor told me if someone leaves the rooms, then we can pretty much assure that's their disease running the show. They're having some kind of crisis. They have a fucked up recovery. They're a dry drunk. They're not working a good program, and you need to stay away from them because now they are not good. And I see people in the grocery store looking at me like I'm that girl. And it's heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. And yet I come home and I talk to my husband about it and we're both okay with it. We are both okay with it because we are leaning farther and farther into our truth, meeting more and more people that share these opinions. And it feels like the most real part of me. Okay, back to the good girl. I don't know if I was ever a good girl. Like, I didn't even follow the clean girl aesthetic. Barf. I actually hated that. I am a maximalist. I like loud things. I like tons of jewelry. I like a loud style. You will never see me being clean girl, good girl. But I do have to admit, maybe I was fearful, insecure girl. And so I am embracing a more honest side of me, the part of me that's not going to stay quiet. And I'm radically embracing my feminism and the reality that anger can actually be sacred and really clarifying. You know, Anger often shows up when we finally see something for what it is. When we finally see something really fucking clear, you recognize an injustice or someone is a hypocrite or there are systems around you that are harming people. That's when anger shows up, at least for me. And for a long time, I've been told that anger made me look difficult, dramatic, inappropriate, or worse, not emotionally sober. And so I was really afraid to voice any of that, but I don't see that anyway anymore. I see it as energy. I see it as fuel. And it's a signal to me that something matters, that something is important to me. So instead of trying to soothe that out or make it more palatable, I'm just letting that fucking voice exist. And I am going to speak honestly about what I believe. I went to an event the other day and I met up with Casey Davidson, the host of the Hello Someday podcast. She's also a friend of this pod. And we were talking about our political views and feminism. And I said, do you think this is going to stop me? No. I don't care about the pushback. I will continue to be loud and proud and feminist and fight for rights. And I will continue to voice my opinion about dogma and organized structures that are harmful to women because you're not going to dim my light. You're just not. Sobriety didn't just remove alcohol from my life. It removed this filter. And what's left in me is a person that cares deeply about truth and injustice and women's rights, deeply about women having access to honest recovery that doesn't gaslight or guilt or shame. I care deeply about that. So that will be my hill to die on. So I remember telling Casey Davidson, I'll fucking keep going. I don't care. Take it or leave it. In fact, I actually posted a picture on Instagram today of me wearing a t-shirt that said cunt. My husband got it for me when we were in New York at the Chelsea flea market. And now in fashion circles, cunt is a good thing, right? It's in the trans community, they say she's giving cunt if you take a really awesome photo, if you're really slaying in a picture or an outfit is really amazing, in the fashion community, she's looking cunty, she's really cunty. So that's actually a compliment. But I wanted it because I know that people look at it like, oh, we know Kate, she's just gone off her rocker, but for me, it was more of a fashion context. But I don't care. I don't care what you think of me, right? I just don't. So, okay. And then speaking of fashion, now I got to talk about this, even though this is a sobriety pod, because fashion is my creative side. It is the play and the dreaming. Honestly, it's what saves me from real life. I hope we all have a creative outlet or something that we do that doesn't feel so deep and exhausting. Fashion is my sport. It's like my Super Bowl. I participate in discourse chats. I watch all the shows. I commentate, with other fashion lovers. We talk about what we like, what we don't like. I look through the collections. I subscribe to French Vogue because the layout and the editorial is so much better and beautiful. And it's not so, I don't know, like American Vogue. You might as well read People magazine. I mean, it's filled with celebrities and bullshit. There's always a celebrity on the cover. They don't really highlight the designers or the fashion. I mean, hopefully the new editor-in-chief, Chloe Mall, can take on this and go back to the old school way that Vogue used to be, where it was back in the days of Grace Coddington when it was beautiful editorial. Anyway, I've gotten way off topic. Okay. So I still want to look at, on my creative side, what am I shedding? And I'm certainly shedding chasing trends, chasing external validation, and in another aspect of my creative life and modeling, chasing the fucking spotlight. As far as fashion goes, all that's fallen away from me in my life is this need to be trendy. And I love fashion, that hasn't changed, but my relationship with it has. There was a time when getting dressed was a little bit more about fitting in and trying to find myself in sobriety. And I was certainly following trends, buying things because they looked good on Instagram, trying to keep up on Instagram, trying to be a model. Don't laugh. I know. And that energy isn't really bad. It was just external and performative. And fashion was like, it was approval. And I feel all that falling away when I sit for hours and watch fashion shows. And it's just me in my imaginary dreamlike state, in my imaginary world. And it's my escape. And I really look at outfits and try to figure out, what is their point of view? What are they trying to convey? What's the narrative here? When I put outfits together, the first thing I ask my husband is this giving performative? Is this giving Halloween costume? Is this giving flight attendant? Is this giving 80s rock star? And he'll be like, what are you talking about? But really what I'm asking him is this saying what I'm trying to say, right? And if it's giving anything country, I will stay so far away from it. I cannot do anything country or cowgirl. No, thank you. I don't want to see it. So if I even feel a hint of country, I can't wear it. But anyway, I'm really embracing my personal relationship with fashion and creativity and experimentation. And like I said, fashion as play and fashion as my escape. I mean, we all need a freaking escape right now. I don't know if I would have made it through the last few months if it wasn't Fashion Week in New York, London, and Paris. I mean, and Milan. Like the podcast and the commentary and the discourse, watching all the shows. I mean, I live on YouTube. And I wouldn't have made it through what I've been going through. And I wouldn't have made it if I didn't have this creative outlet. And when it comes to my personal style, I've long since given up the fact that I have to define it and stay with it. I certainly have a template. I have a color palette I stick with. I like really bold colors. I wear only primary colors. I wear some browns, but if I'm going to wear color, it's primary. I wear a lot of black. I wear pops of red, kind of a fiery orange red. And that's my template. But sometimes it's masculine and sometimes it's feminine. Sometimes it's weird. It's punk. And it's all about self-discovery. And when I get dressed, it's like, I really am trying to convey a point of view. And so I'm really embracing, I'm not trying to look like everyone else. I'm trying to look like myself, and I'm embracing that. And so reach out to me. Let me know what you are working on embracing and what you're what you're lurking on. Yeah, let me know what you're lurking on. I'm telling you guys right now, social media is disgusting. It is so performative. There is so much AI. And as a coach, someone who knows the back end of search optimization and the things that we do to get seen and heard. I mean, I've worked with a coach that specializes in meta ads, and I worked with a coach that specializes in funnels and SEO. And oh my God, I mean, I just want to keep it real. And maybe I just want to keep it simple. Maybe I just want to keep screaming into this mic. I don't know. Right now, I don't even feel like I have to know. I just have to keep running with the fucking fire horse. That's where I'm at. So thanks for hanging out with me for these last 30 minutes where it's fucking snowing in March in Seattle. Are you kidding me? All right. Gotta go.